My name is Martin De Mello. I am among other things, a writer of poetry and short fiction. I used to work for an organisation called Common Word, which is a writing development agency based in Manchester. Besides that, or before that, I worked did advice work, mental health work, worked in IT for a stint. I don't recommend that to anyone. Development education, and my all-time favourite job, pizza deliveries. That was quite fun. So I've done bits and bats of a variety of things, which from a writing point of view has been really interesting and really useful. From a career point of view, maybe not so much, but anyway. So that's me. And then in terms of my background, as you can see, there's like a chest of drawers and a wall, and but seriously, background wise, so my mother is let me get this right, so English, German, Scottish, Welsh, I think, but it's a bit hard to know because she grew up in care, so she didn't know her birth parents, so this is what she's been told. And then my father comes from Singapore, but his family come from Malacca in Malaysia, and I think on his mother's side originally from Goa in India, but they are what are referred to as the Portuguese over there, even though the Portuguese had a maritime empire which included Malacca. They got kicked out by the Dutch, who then got kicked out by the English. But the people who the Portuguese first intermarried with 400 years ago kept the names and also the religion. They stayed Catholic for the most part. But within the family, the mix is Portuguese, Malay, Tamil, and Chinese. So that's and Indian, sorry. And that's my father's side of the family.
That's brilliant. Maybe that's why you're so good with languages.
Well, I'm crap at languages, but I'm quite good at language in terms of English.
Language.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your writing career. You always amaze me because you're not looking for being published. Let's put it that way. You write, but you don't think about publishing your writings. Why is that, first of all?
Why? I enjoy writing. I'm not the difficulty with publishing is then you've got to engage with the industry, and you have to engage with what publishers are looking for and their idea of what an audience is. And in terms of what I do, it doesn't really fit very easily into we'll call it the mainstream for the sake of argument, into the mainstream of publishing within the UK. So it's, for me, I mean, when I was younger, a lot younger, way back in the mist of time, I did make a little bit of an effort to try and get published, but I got the same kind of response all the time. So what I chose to focus on was just writing what I wanted to write. So when people suggest, why don't you write this? Or we really like what you've done, but could you change this bit? Then I guess my response was, well, that's not what I'm interested in. So I'll write what I'm interested in. I'll write technically the way that I want to write. And if at any point in the future, an publishing opportunity came along, then I would take it, but not at the expense of what I was doing. And that's quite a common experience for a lot of people who don't write within the Anglo-American tradition. So it becomes quite difficult. So, you know, Jennifer McCumbee, she's an international superstar now. But I first met her, I can't remember now, 10, 11, 12 years ago, something like that, when she was struggling to get any recognition at all. It took her 17 years to get her first novel published, which wasn't even her first novel. It was the second novel that she wrote. And the first novel that she published has only just been published now. But for her second novel, the people who rejected her in the first place came back and said, "I would really like to publish what you wrote." But it's that thing. Now she has a reputation, and she gained a reputation in the US rather than the UK. Well, in Africa and then the US. People are interested. So she's still doing what she did before. It's just the attitude has changed because of the degree of success that she's received. But in terms of the pressure that puts on you, she's pretty much immune to it because she's just going to do her own thing. But there may be consequences later on in her career, but not in terms of her African audience. That she's established that audience, and that they're not going to change their attitude to her writing because she doesn't do what English publishers want or American publishers want. So yeah, using that as an example, really. Obviously I'm never going to become famous in the way that Jennifer has, but yeah, I've had one collection published by Fliptie. It sold about, I don't know, 30 copies, something like that, which tells you the two things. One, that I'm crap at promoting my own work, and two, that it probably doesn't really fit into the idea of poetry as it was then and still is now. So, you know, you can either complain about it or rail against it, or you can just accept it. And for me, it's you just accept. It's like, what's important to me is that I write in the way that I want to, that I enjoy, and I have a very small audience of people that I share my work with, and I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah. You last time we spoke, I realized that you're not on social media a lot. Has it changed, or have you got?
No, me and social media just don't get along. So.
No. So there is no way for people, if they want to check your work or know about your writing, to find out?
At the moment, no. I'm trying to think if it has appeared online anywhere. It might have done. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you search me online, you don't get very much.
It's interesting that you seem to think of old school in that respect. So
yeah. Well, I guess the problem with social media is there's a lot of people on it, and there's a lot of noise. So it tends to be who shouts the loudest, and I'm never going to do that.
Sure.
You know, spending a day promoting my writing or spending a day writing, which am I going to do? I'm going to write every time. So
in terms of inspiration, where do you get your inspiration for writing? How do you get your ideas?
It's quite a lot of different sources, really. So the main inspiration is just day-to-day life. And this is where having done quite a few different jobs is useful. Like if you work in housing, you see lots of things that you're not going to see otherwise. If you work in mental health, you see lots of things, but also you get exposed to quite a lot of ideas about how people understand the world and construct the world around them. And that's the thing that interests me. So I'm very interested in, well, my writing is very much driven by ideas, but I'm very interested in how perception occurs. And I guess that's a thing that underlies a lot of what I do. So in terms of my inspiration, the inspiration is just the, you know, what happens day to day. In terms of artistic inspiration, then yeah, for poetry, there are a few poets that I will go to, not so much individual poets, but as I guess traditions. So I'm very interested in like Chinese poetry, both classical and contemporary, Japanese poetry, Korean poetry, Indian poetry. Increasingly trying to find Iranian poets and Arabic poets. So I think what inspires me is reading stuff from different traditions and different perspectives. And the challenge of trying to understand that and trying to understand what they're doing, and then to see how I can make use of that myself. And then the other main thing that really inspires me is film. So I don't watch that much film these days, but you know, it's interesting what you can do with a camera. and the extent to which that can be replicated in a poem or a short story, and then what you can do in a poem or short story that you can't do with a camera. So a lot of my work's very visual, but I guess that a source of fascination, if you like, is how you can distort people's expectations of a visual event. And you can do that in film in particular ways, and you can replicate that to an extent in a poem or a short story. And then you can do lots of things in a short story that are just impossible in film. So I guess there's a bit of a conversation that's going on, and that's really my source of inspiration.
Fantastic. Martin, I don't know if you have any of your writing handy that you could share with us. Do you want to read?
Do I want to read my writing? It's impossible to read. I'm crap. I keep using the word crap. I'm not that good at reading it. If you want me to send you some stuff that you can then put on.
Yeah.
If you like, if people there's an interview, I can send you a few pieces that you could put underneath it if you want.
Yeah, as a link that people could go and have a look. That would be great. Yeah. Okay, that's fantastic. So who's your role model? Who's an inspirational figure that, you know, in our life, not necessarily in terms of you as an artist, but everyone comes to difficult times, and we all need a little bit of inspiration to go over different hurdles. Who inspires you?
So I don't have a role model as such, but the person that has most inspired me has been my daughter. So, and yeah, it's just me and her mother split up when she was 1, and went through quite a difficult period. But it's and this comes into one of your questions was what's the best advice anyone has ever given you? And really, they kind of come together. I can't remember who told me this, but what they said is you don't bring up a child, you bring up an adult. What kind of adult do you want them to be? And which really struck me, because it was like, I wanted my daughter not to have the kind of experiences that I did growing up. But that's quite a narrow way of looking at things. So when I started thinking really about what kind of adult I wanted her to be, then you've got to ask yourself the question, what kind of adult are you? What kind of person are you? So really it was that I don't know what you would call it, struggle maybe. It was bringing my daughter up and all the things that she did, all the little things that kids do all the time, just really quite amazing, but easy to miss. And I think because I had her every 2 weeks, I was much more focused and a lot more attention on what she was saying or doing. And she was just a very different person to I was as a child. And she dealt with the world much more comfortably than I did. But yeah, it was just that I found inspiring, but just being a parent and watching her grow up and all the things that she did. And even when you're sat at home at 2 a.m. counting all the flowers on the wallpaper kind of thing, like, where the hell are you, sort of stuff. It's like you really have to inspect yourself or investigate yourself to find how you feel about things and what you want for your child and what you want for yourself as a consequence of whatever you want for your child. So that's the thing that I found most inspiring. And in terms of my daughter, she's just like, yeah, she's just much further ahead than I was at her age. She's just like, she knows what she wants. She knows how she's going to go about doing it. She's really focused, and she's just fun to be around. So
amazing. Do you want to share her name or?
Yeah, so her name is Maya Sophia De Mello. So her mother is Jewish, but then she's got all the other heritages that I have on my side. So so Maya is a Indian name, Hindu name, which means, really it means illusion. Sophia is a Muslim name, so that's, but just to say as well, Maya is also a Jewish name, Maya, but it's spelled a bit differently. So going with that name just allowed her to play with both of those things. Sophia is a Muslim name because part of the family is Muslim, and it means innocence. And De Mello is obviously the Portuguese name from 400 years ago. So what her name actually means is the illusion of innocence, which is exactly how she is. Everyone thinks she's just like this innocent little thing. She isn't. So, but, yeah.
Yeah, kids are amazing. I remember I had this kind of like boxed in ideas what I want to do with my children and how I want them to behave and how I treat them in their life. And to me it was a shock when my first one, Atusa, was born, and I realized, oops, this is a human being. I cannot program everything. I cannot have a set plan. I want to do this for my child and get this outcome. It was a shock, but it's amazing. Yeah, they are
That's that thing as well. They don't come with a manual, so, and you can't write the manual yourself, so you have to do it with them.
True. Yeah, and I've got a son as well, and it's amazing how different they are.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're brother and sister doesn't mean they would have the same characteristics and the same behavior, and they want the same thing from their life. So it's amazing in a way to see how independent they are from you.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's a website that is going to be focusing on writing. It would be amazing to know what sort of book you would like to read, what is your favorite book, or if there's anything that you want to share with us. It doesn't have to be your favorite, perhaps the book that you read currently.
Yeah. I don't have a favorite book or a favorite author or a favorite anything really. I've got a favorite daughter, but that's only because I've got one. So I was thinking about this, and really I was thinking that, well, there are two things, I think. So one is what got me into writing in the first place, so specifically poetry, and it was a writer called Edward Thomas, and a poem of his called Like the Touch of Rain. So that's what drew me into poetry. I think I was 13 or 14 at the time, I can't remember. But it articulated something that I felt but didn't know how to say. And so really, I guess a lot of my writing from that point is really how do you say something that otherwise can't be said? And it's a lot of poetry is very indirect. I think the poetry that's kind of directly says what it wants to say is much less interesting than the poetry which is challenges you to approach the poem and ask questions of yourself as well as ask questions of the poem, which is another reason why I like to read a lot of stuff from other traditions, because it takes you a little while to get a handle on it. And then I guess the other thing that really kind of showed me what you could do was a Japanese writer called Sagawa Chika, who probably the first Japanese modernist poet, but was very interested in how you bring kind of like naturalist writing into formalist writing, into the absurd or the surreal or those kind of things. So quite heavily influenced by European writers of the time, but writing in a way that only a Japanese writer could do. So it was that insight into what happens when you make use of more than one tradition or more than one culture, which seems to be, so people talk a lot about fusion, for example, but it seems to me that a lot of writing by English speaking poets or English poets that makes use of, say, we'll call Japanese or Chinese or Eastern traditions, is much less interesting than when it's the other way around. I feel like there's a very different way of engaging. So one of the things that interests me is that the writers from, not just Japanese writers, but I'm thinking of people like Aimé Césaire, who did Return to My Native Land, which is a brilliant, if I think one of the great modernist poems. And he really took surrealism and found a way to work with it to talk about the colonial situation and to produce what's really a great anti-colonial text, but did with surrealism, which no French writer probably could have done. So it's, but it's interesting as well, but kept, it came to be called, I think, negritude. It's kept this idea of African oral literature and African tradition within what he was doing, even though he's from the Caribbean, Martinique, I think it was actually. So it's writing that does that. It's the writing that crosses between those traditions, crosses between boundaries, not only the boundaries between cultures, but the boundary between, for example, the arts and the sciences, which they can seem, certainly here, they can seem a bit too rigid. That's not the case in other places where, you know, not uncommon for mathematicians to write poetry, for example, or music. So yeah, it's that kind of writing that interests me and inspires me.
Amazing, thanks for that. I've written some notes and I can refer to them and start reading. Okay, so in terms of ending this conversation, it would be great if you could give us any advice in terms of basically writing, or it doesn't have to be just writing. I think it could be more general.
Yeah, I mean, specifically in terms of writing, really, the only advice I can give is do what you're interested in. Don't do what other people ask you to do. Don't do what other people say you should do. Do what interests you, and try and find a reliable reader whose feedback you trust, because it's a lot of people put stuff on social media. This is one of the reasons that I don't do it, and really they just want everyone to say, oh, that's wonderful, that's amazing, I love it. That doesn't give you any information. That doesn't tell you what you've done well or done badly, or how you can improve. And in many ways it discourages you from improving as a writer or developing as a writer, because you're getting an easy win, as it were. So the real question is, you know, the best advice I can give you is to find someone who loves literature but isn't interested in writers. You know, so I was trained that it's all about the text, that the writer is, you know, the biography of the writer is unimportant, or the situation of the writer is unimportant. So really what happens in the text. So if you can find someone has that kind of approach, then they can be really, really helpful to you in terms of how you develop. But at the same time, you've got to be aware of where they're coming from and where you're coming from, and those two things might not match up. So you've got to be confident that you are doing what it is that you actually want to do, that you're not too much swayed by one person's opinion or other people's opinion, which comes back to write what you're interested in. Because if you're interested in it, generally you'll be the expert in it. So yeah, that's the best advice I can give. But the other advice is also to be a good listener as a writer. Listen to what people say about your writing. Not when they just give you praise. Listen to what they say when they're giving you feedback or constructive criticism or any of those kind of things. And that's something that a lot of writers also find quite difficult, because I think they kind of see a personal connection between themselves and the text. Whereas for me, it's just a text. Once it's written, that's it. And, you know, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to whoever reads it. So I think that yeah, that's the summary of my advice.
Yeah, it's not always easy, but very good advice. Thank you very much, particularly in this social media culture, and likes. Everything that you say or do should be liked by so many other people.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Okay, thank you very much for giving me your time, and I really enjoyed talking to you. So we let you carry on with your busy daily schedule as ever. And I also add the link or that information that you would send me as an example of your writing. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's been a pleasure, Shahira.